So keep stopping and starting. So the electron orbit decay problem in modern chemistry is basically when we say, if we take the current view of this atomic model, and what's in the textbooks in education systems is still the Bohr atomic model, like this little orbital pattern of subatomic particles. Even though that's been just completely refuted by the rest of the
time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. But we still get pictures of that in high school textbooks, uni textbooks. Crazy. So if we take this ideology, we take like hydrogen, for example, where it is alleged to be a single positively charged proton with a single negatively charged electron in orbit. So that's the most simple model. And if we don't try to actually create any compounds or complicated molecules, at least we can ignore the fact that the electron can't be orbiting. But if we ignore that and we just take this illusory single isolated piece, then what the issue is that we get is we say, well, where is the energy input that's maintaining charge? Because in order for the electron to be in orbit and to be repelling, and we consider its orbit because we say, it repels the magnetic force rather of the center. So there must be an energy input, something that's maintaining the actual propagation of motion for that particle to be spinning in orbit. Yeah. And then the question is, well, where does the energy come from that allows the electron to maintain its charge? Because over time, if there was no energy input to that system, the actual charge should decay as it uses up its energy, and the electron should plow into the center and therefore eradicate the particle completely. So that when the two charges will come and negate each other, and it should vaporize. And there was I can't remember the name of the guy. It was a wonderful guy I saw at a uni once, who was just presenting his idea that if that actually was the case, the entire of the atoms of the universe should have obliterated themselves billions of years ago. Like there shouldn't be any matter if that was the function. There was I can't remember the names of these works. I know that recently, like sometime after 2000, between then and now, there have been studies, university studies, to look at whether or not they could detect inputs of energy from non-external space, like whether actually within atoms there could be energy sources, and then some people speculated that was like energy coming from dimensions of time, etc., etc., etc. Or electrons moving in and out so that they deplete in charge and then they vaporize out of our reality. They gain charge in an inverse, like counter space, and then they return to our reality at their constant charge. So like there's all these ideas, but at least for the sake of that research, they couldn't specifically say, yes, we can say that there's energy which is being sourced from the inside of the atom, So when the question is, where does the energy come from to maintain the charge? Or is there actually a particle that needs charge maintenance? I think, the most logical answer to that question. You go off in a million angles of trying to describe functions of parallel dimensions that allow charge like pulsing. Or you can just stipulate that maybe there isn't actually a ball with a charge that is spinning. I mean, that just seems logical to me, but who am I to, put that forward? So what we get now, but it hasn't caught up, but our textbooks haven't caught up to it, is this idea of like the center of atoms surrounded by concentric orbital patterns, concentric points or spheres of cloud charge potential that could interact with atoms around them at any spherical point. And that's the end of where we've got to in like standard modern physics in terms of being able to explain that to people.
Right, but aren't there people that are suggesting some very big alternatives to
I mean,
standard model?
Yeah. And there always have been, But it's amazing how their work has been has been pulled out. Like, one of the most interesting things is if you go back, you can get straight off the US Patents Office website. There's a patent of Tesla's. It would probably be around between 1890 to 1900. I can't remember the patent number. I can look it up. It's for his distribution network for the Niagara Falls turbine system. So when he set up his AC generators in Niagara Falls, and he had to get the electricity from Niagara Falls to Buffalo, to the city. It was 23 or 29 miles away, I can't remember. And he has a patent for his, basically, electrical distribution system. You know, lots of big trees, lots of big poles with wires that run through them. And in the patent itself, he goes into great detail about why you need to have a very specific length of the distribution network from the generator to each of the loads and the endpoint for the reflection wave relative to the input frequency of the turbo. And he even goes so far, I think he uses 900 and something hertz as his input frequency, which is odd because his turbines were produced for 60 hertz grid frequency, 60 cycles per second. And yet his own patents for the distribution network, clearly discuss the delicate intricacy of reflecting electric waves in conductors, so that if you wanted to have the peak of an electric voltage, for example, so let's say you have a generator of 5,000 volts, you want to have 5,000 volts delivered to your load is 100 kilometers away, you need to have a very specific input frequency in the generator to make sure that through the increasing and decreasing amplitude of the wave, that your load is exactly positioned at the peak part. If you place your load at the end of the wavelength, then you'll have 0 volts. So he even talks about how, and it's interesting because like modern radio people get this to a degree, they talk about quarter wave antennas. So if you've got a wavelength of say 1 meter, you know, like an FM radio antenna, you're using it as a transmitter, you're at a festival and you're transmitting FM radio on your 1 meter aerial, people who have quarter wavelengths antennas, so if they have 25 centimeter antennas, they will pick up the highest amplitude of the wave. So if you imagine that the antenna is like this, and if you were to draw this sine wave pattern through the antenna in 2D space, we start off with kind of nothing, except it includes the wires themselves, like the generator, are also part of the antenna, but we ignore that for the theory. So this amplitude ramps up here. It's 0 halfway through the antenna, and it's 0 again at the full length of the antenna. So antennas which are only the height of a quarter or 3/4, they will be resonated and rung constantly at the highest amplitude, the greatest amplitude of the input wave. So if I have a 1 meter transmitter and a 1 meter receiver, that will be less efficient in terms of receiving the information than if I have a 1 meter transmitter and a 25 centimeter receiver. So Tesla understood this really, really well. And his own patents demonstrate his use of it and his application. How it went from that to not actually being utilized like that, I don't know. Speculation.